All right, so over here I've got adaptive gaming set up, and I'll just talk briefly through a couple options that are out there, and then you guys can try out what I have set up right now, which is the adaptive controller. But the main thing to consider whenever you're doing gaming for people with disabilities is what's called button mapping. And button mapping allows you to change which buttons on a controller control what. It's the best way I can put it. But the example I use is if you have a left-hand amputee who's holding a controller like this, but they really need to use this left stick in a game, you can make that controlled by the right side instead. When you do that, you lose the original control for the right side, though, because then it gets switched over to the left. So if you're doing that, you have to consider which buttons control, or which buttons they need for a game and which ones they can reach. But there is the Xbox Professional controller, which came out for pro gamers but has 2 extra buttons on each side. So then you could put these 2 over on the right for that person too. I got a couple more options out there. This one actually has some other cool features in it too. You can adjust like how sensitive the joysticks are. So normally people would use that for shooter games to try and get their aiming down quicker, but you can actually do some tremor dampening with that, where if their thumb has a resting tremor, then they're not always activating that joystick. But if they're not using one of these standard controllers, you can then move on to the Xbox adaptive controller, which we have in front of us right here. And that has really changed how you're able to set up the games for people with disability, as you can use any sort of button, joystick, switch, or toggle to play the games. So the way it works is on the back side of it, it's got all of these ports that represent all of the buttons on the Xbox, and then you can just plug and play, there it goes, whatever you want to. So the demo I have set up will be Pinball for you guys to play, and usually you would use the left bumper and the right bumper for the paddles. All I had to do is plug in the 2 buttons for the left bumper and the right bumper, and then you're good to go. So it's plug and play. You can also get customize it even more in the settings, which I'll walk through. And you can use almost anything that's out there. You can use the standard big buddy buttons, joysticks. They got some micro switches too, so smaller ones, a foot pedal, a joystick that you would use with your chin and mouth, and a giant one as well, kind of like a flight stick. So you can just plug it in, and almost all of them are guaranteed to work. A lot of these buttons are used in rehab to begin with for either computer access or for wheelchair controls as well. This is a good picture of how he has it set up. He's got a button up here by his head. I think he has 2 actually, there's one hidden. And then he's got 2 different joysticks down by his hands. So this one's more of like a ball mount joystick. This one's a field goal post, so it's a U shape. And both of those are used for driving wheelchairs too. Those are both options you would get if a standard joystick doesn't work well enough for you. Then he's got a ton of micro switches down here as well. This is out in Craig Hospital in Denver, where they've been doing a lot of rehab, and they were the ones that got to test the adaptive controller and kind of be part of the design process. What's really nice about it now, though, is you can use a lot of the systems that you would to drive a power wheelchair if they're not using a joystick, and have them test it out in a video game, like maybe driving a car or something, before you put them in a chair. So if they're a new injury, not used to it yet, I've seen people use like 4 of these buttons to drive a wheelchair, just mounted by their elbow or down by their knee, or a combo. So you could, as a therapist, play around with them for a while and see what setup kind of works for them, and then set that up on their wheelchair before they even get to that point. There's another cool option out there, which is called the quad stick, which was designed for gamers with quadriplegia. They got no motion below their neck, or very, very little motion. This is all controlled by their head and their mouth. So it's a joystick that you would use by moving your head up, down, left, and right, and then 4 sip and puff controls. So there's a sip and puff hidden, and then these 3 across the front. Each sip and each puff is one control, and then combos of them are other controls, like a harmonica. So if you blow in the 2 left holes, that's something else. That's also used for wheelchair driving too, sip and puff. So another way you can try out some of those controls before you put them in a chair. But there's like 30 different button combinations you can do with that. So the best way to see it is this video of a very popular streamer who plays competitive shooter games this way, and he's pretty highly ranked too. So you'll see him in the bottom left controlling it. And so I think the way he said, the way he has it set up is like the one sip controls whether he's moving or aiming with the joystick. So right now he's running, sipping is running forward, puffing is running backwards, and he's got all the controls figured out. So switching weapons, throwing grenades, and he'll often live stream where you can watch him play. He'll talk at the same time too, so he'll like take his mouth off, talk for a second, go right back to gaming. So he's got it figured out. It said him and his brother took like 20 hours to get it set up right for him, and then like another 20 hours for him to get used to the controls. But now he's pretty much a pro at it. So, and before that, like he said, he was not doing much at home. He was just in bed most of the hours of the day or watching TV. So they got that set up. Now he gets to play games, and he's a streamer, so he's made some income off of it as well. I think he's still pretty low, but he's like $1,000 a month or something he makes off of it. So he's at least got a source of income coming in from it as well. And then there's the social aspect of gaming too, where you're talking and all of that, making a lot of friends and staying in touch with them. There's also eye tracking, which just follows where your eyes are looking on a computer screen. So if you don't have too much neck motion, you can kind of look to the corners, and you could use that to play some games as well, mainly for computer access again. Switch over to the Xbox. Yeah. They typically don't cover it. So, I mean, yeah, if you can swing it for computer access first, but you might see it in other avenues, yeah. They're pretty, thankfully, affordable. The quad stick was $500, but this is only $100, and you might be able to use some of the buttons if you get through insurance. The VA hospital pays for a lot of this stuff, though, because the VA pays for a lot of recreational equipment, so they'll pay for like basketball wheelchairs or like outdoor like hand cycles. They've started to cover gaming and smart home stuff. They actually announced that, I think this next year at the Veterans Wheelchair Games, which is where they do like the basketball, football, rugby, all of that, they're gonna have a gaming competition too. And so at a lot of their hospitals, they're asking who's interested in gaming, setting it up so then they can play with other veterans and like have that social aspect too. And then I think they want to put together an esports team to have like a competitive VA team that kind of plays in some competitions. So, yeah. In the Xbox menu, they got their accessibility settings, ease of access, and it's all stuff you would kind of recognize from your phone or a computer, like screen narrator, magnifier, closed captioning, high contrast, game transcriptions out there now too, which is on both this and PlayStation. And that's where if you're in a group chat with your friends, it will do a live transcription of it on your phone so you can read what they're saying if you're deaf, can't hear what they are talking about. And then you can type a message back on your phone and it will read it aloud for them while they're playing. So they've added in some social features as well for accessibility. And then the controller settings they have, button mapping, like I talked about. You can also use that on the adaptive controller. So I got different profiles set up actually. So if you had all these buttons mounted around the person and they're playing, they might not be able to unplug this and change it to a new button if they switch games. But you can cycle through profiles with this button here. So you can have like one set up for soccer, one set up for a shooter, one set up for a racing game. And you get 3 profiles, so you can have 3 saved at least. And to edit them, you just go into the edit, pick the button, and then change it to which one you want it to be. Another nice thing Xbox has, which is just on Xbox, is called Copilot settings. That allows you to use 2 controllers at the same time playing as just one. So back to that example of someone who's a left-hand amputee. If they're holding the controller like this, they might want to use those buttons. But then you could add this to it as well, plug in a joystick and mount that by the residual limb or maybe down by their foot instead. And they can use the joystick down there and mount some other buttons around too. So now they're playing all together. The first use I saw of it was 2 brothers playing though. We had a kid with really severe needs who could only use one button. So they gave him just one big buddy button mounted on his wheelchair. And he was responsible for shooting the ball in soccer, and then his brother did everything else, but they were the same player, so they got to at least play on the same team and not against each other. So I got Pinball set up. Let me get these wires untangled a little bit. There we go. So the way I have it set up is you would pull this stick down to launch the ball, and then this one is your left paddle, and this one is your right paddle.
No pressure, right?
Okay, no promises.
You gotta beat the high score. Smooth 600,000.
There we go. I don't know if that helps, but
It does help a little bit, thank you.
yeah.
It's still not even a normal dude.
The adaptive compared to other companies.
Microsoft, yeah. Because I was going to say computer lets you customize the most,
Yeah.
but Microsoft and Windows are pretty much hand in hand, and you can use this on a computer through Microsoft. So, but they've been taking the most steps to kind of develop this stuff for gaming. And beforehand, it was adapting stuff that's out there for like computer access or rigging custom controllers, and now they're just trying to like push into that side as well.
Mitch, do you want to pull out that box for the adaptive controller again?
Yep.
That was kind of cool. The Microsoft also, the box for the adaptive controller, they also made adaptive. So if someone had, if someone with a disability could actually open the box, it has that. The box would be heavier with something in it.
Yeah.
You could open it with one hand because there's that little tassel on top. Then you would pull that out. That's like your instructions, and then that flap there would actually pull the device out itself. So that was kind of an outside the box, if you will, solution. Really cool, universal design.
Yeah. Kind of showed that they weren't just like,
They weren't just mailing it in.
yeah, and trying to make the controller.
Yeah.
And that's what I think they brought in. I think a lot at Craig Hospital is where they tested a lot of this. So when they were designing it, they worked with them and Able Gamers, a charity, and were doing all of that. And then they I think they gave the guy a demo, and he's like, I can't open this box. They're like, okay, we gotta.
All right.
We never thought about that. So
One, it's
yeah,
like designing a car that you can't open the door for. It's
yeah,
nice car, but I can't. Yeah.
get into it.
Yep.
Let me push this